My name is Madeline Hart. I am 36 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I was defined by the things that surrounded me rather than the person I actually was inside. I lived in a world of carefully curated surfaces. If you were to look at my life from the outside, you would see a portrait of the American dream rendered in high definition. We lived in a beautiful craftsman house in the Pearl District that was the envy of our friends and the pride of my husband, Grant Sterling. Grant was a man who seemed to have been carved out of success itself. He was charming and ambitious and driven by a hunger that I once mistook for passion. We met in college where I was studying education and literature while he was in business school constructing the blueprint for the empire he would eventually build. Back then, I thought he hung the moon and the stars just for me. By the time we had been married for 5 years, Grant had built his own commercial real estate company from the ground up and achieved every big dream he had ever whispered to me in the dark. We took vacations to Hawaii and Europe, and we talked about starting a family and filling our empty guest rooms with children. I thought I knew this man. I thought I knew everything about the life we were building together. But the truth is often a quiet rot that spreads beneath the floorboards long before the house collapses. I used to be a writer. Before I was Mrs. Grant Sterling, I was Madeline Hart, the girl with ink stains on her fingers and a novel burning in her chest. I had dreams that did not involve flower arrangements or hosting dinner parties for potential investors. I wanted to teach American literature and inspire students and write stories that mattered. I did teach for a while at the local high school. I loved my job and I loved my students. But slowly and methodically, Grant had dismantled that part of me. It was never an overt demand. Grant was too smart for that. It was always a suggestion wrapped in concern. He would tell me that I looked tired. He would say that his income was more than enough for both of us. He would suggest that I focus on the house because his partners were coming over, and the impression we made was vital to his next deal. Over the last 8 years, I had allowed myself to be erased. I had become a supporting character in the Grant Sterling show. I remember the dinner parties vividly. I would sit at the head of the long mahogany table under the crystal chandelier and smile until my cheeks ached. I would listen to Grant tell stories about his deals and his clients and his projects. I would nod and laugh at the right moments like a well-trained doll. I would look around the table at the other wives and wonder if they felt as empty as I did. We were ornaments. We were there to prove that our husbands were stable and successful men who could provide for beautiful women. I had traded my pen for a silver serving spoon, and I hated myself for it. I remember looking at myself in the mirror on the morning of October 15th. I saw a woman who was impeccably dressed in clothes that Grant had paid for. My hair was perfect. My makeup was flawless. But the eyes staring back at me were dead. I was drowning in luxury. I was suffocating in a house that felt more like a museum than a home. I had vague suspicions that Grant was pulling away from me, but I pushed them down. I ignored the sick feeling in my stomach when he smiled at his phone screen. I pretended not to notice when he started going to the gym more and buying new clothes. I told myself I was being paranoid and insecure. Deep down, I knew that my marriage was a lie, but I did not want to face the terror of starting over. That afternoon felt heavy with an unspoken omen. It was a Tuesday. I had driven to a parent-teacher conference that ran late into the evening. Even though I was no longer teaching full-time, I still volunteered and stayed involved with the school district because it was the only tether I had left to my old self. The meeting had been exhausting. By the time I walked out to the parking lot, the sky had opened up. It was raining hard. It was typical Portland October weather, where the rain does not just fall but seems to attack the earth. I got into my car. It was a reliable sedan from 2015. Grant had offered to buy me a new luxury vehicle recently, but I had resisted. I liked my car. It was one of the few things that felt like it belonged to me and not to the image of us. I started the engine and pulled out onto the wet asphalt. The windshield wipers slapped back and forth in a rhythmic hypnosis. I turned onto Highway 26, heading west toward home. The road was slick with oil and water. Visibility was poor, and the streetlights smeared across the wet windshield like streaks of dirty paint. I had driven this route 1,000 times. I knew every curve and every exit like the back of my hand. I was a careful driver. I stayed in the right lane and kept my speed steady at 55 miles per hour. The radio was playing a soft jazz tune that did nothing to soothe the anxiety rattling in my chest. I was thinking about Grant. I was thinking about how distant he had been lately. I was thinking about how he had stopped touching me the way he used to, and how our Friday date nights had been canceled more and more often. I was thinking about Ivy Summers, his new assistant, who was 24 years old and blonde and gorgeous. I was thinking about how Grant talked about her constantly and how she seemed to be everywhere lately. I shook my head to clear the thoughts. I needed to focus on the road. The rain was coming down harder now. It hammered against the roof of the car. Ahead of me, I saw a sea of red brake lights flaring in the gloom. Traffic was slowing down. I lifted my foot from the accelerator and moved it to the brake pedal. I pressed down gently. Nothing happened. My foot met no resistance. The pedal sank all the way to the floorboard with a sickening ease. It felt like stepping into a void. For a fraction of a second, my brain refused to process what was happening. I thought perhaps my foot had slipped. I lifted my foot and pressed again. Nothing. I pressed harder. I stomped on the pedal. Still nothing. My brakes were completely gone. The panic that shot through me in that moment was cold and sharp. It was a physical blow that knocked the wind out of my lungs. The car was not slowing down. I was still hurtling forward at 55 miles per hour on a slick highway surrounded by metal and glass. I pumped the brakes frantically. I slammed my foot down over and over again, praying for friction or resistance or anything that would stop the momentum. But the car just kept gliding over the wet pavement like a stone skipped across a pond. I tried to downshift, but I was going too fast, and the gears ground together with a terrible screeching sound. Directly in front of me was a massive semi-truck. Its brake lights were glowing like demon eyes through the rain. The distance between my hood and the steel bumper of the truck was closing rapidly. I was going to hit it. I was going to die. Time seemed to warp. It stretched and compressed all at once. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I had a split second to make a choice. If I hit the truck, I would be crushed instantly. I yanked the steering wheel to the right, trying to get to the shoulder or the ditch or anywhere that wasn't solid steel, but I overcorrected. The tires lost their grip on the wet road. My car spun out. I remember the sickening feeling of losing control. It is a sensation of total helplessness. The world outside my windows became a blur of spinning lights and darkness. I heard the sound of tires screaming against the wet asphalt. I heard the roar of my own blood in my ears. I heard the sound of my own screaming tearing through my throat. The car pirouetted across the lanes. I saw the headlights of oncoming traffic flashing past me. Horns blared in the night. I braced myself for the end. I thought about my parents. I thought about the novel I had never written. I thought about Grant and the cold look in his eyes that morning. Then came the impact. My car slammed into the concrete barrier at 55 miles per hour. The sound was deafening. It was the sound of the world breaking. Metal crunched and glass shattered and the chassis groaned in agony. The airbags deployed with a force that felt like a punch to the face. Dust and powder filled the air. The driver's side of my car crumpled like a piece of paper. Pain exploded through my body. It was a white-hot flash that consumed everything. My ribs shattered. My pelvis cracked. My head slammed against something hard. I could feel the life draining out of me. I could feel the cold rain coming in through the broken window. And then everything went black. The silence that followed was absolute. The jazz music had stopped. The screaming had stopped. The worry about dinner parties and unwritten books had vanished. There was only the dark and the rain and the wreckage of a life that had been built on a foundation of lies. I did not know it then, but the woman I was died in that crash. Madeline Hart, the teacher and the writer and the devoted wife, was gone. Something else was about to be born in the darkness of a hospital room. Something colder. Something harder. Something that would need every ounce of rage to survive what was coming next. But for now, there was only the void. They say that your life flashes before your eyes when you die. That is a lie. It is not a movie reel of your greatest hits, or your happiest moments. It is not a montage of birthday parties and graduations and the first time you fell in love. When the darkness swallowed me after the crash, it did not bring me peace. It brought me clarity. It brought me the sharp and agonizing realization of all the things I had chosen to ignore. I floated in a void that was neither life nor death. In this space, time had no meaning. The sound of crunching metal faded away and was replaced by the whispers of the past. These were the memories I had buried deep under layers of denial and duty. These were the invisible cuts that had bled me dry long before my blood stained the wet asphalt of Highway 26. I drifted back to a Tuesday evening 3 years ago. The memory was so vivid that I could smell the leather and expensive scotch in Grant's home office. It was a room that intimidated me. It was filled with dark mahogany and heavy drapes and awards that celebrated his genius in real estate. I stood in the doorway, clutching a manuscript to my chest. It was 300 pages of my soul. It was the first draft of a novel I had spent 2 years writing in the secret hours of the early morning before Grant woke up to demand his coffee. I remembered the flutter of hope in my chest. It was a fragile bird beating its wings against my ribs. I wanted him to be proud of me. I wanted him to see me not just as his wife or his hostess, but as an intellectual equal. I wanted him to see Madeline Hart, the writer. Grant was sitting behind his massive desk. He was reviewing blueprints for a new commercial complex in downtown Portland. He looked up as I entered, and his face softened into that familiar, indulgent smile. It was the smile one gives to a child who has drawn a crude picture with crayons. I walked forward and placed the stack of paper on his desk. I told him that I had finished it. I told him that I wanted to try and publish it. I told him that I felt like I had finally found my voice again. Grant did not look at the manuscript. He looked at me. He stood up and walked around the desk. He took my face in his hands. His thumbs brushed against the delicate skin under my eyes. His touch was warm, but there was ice in his eyes. He asked me if I had looked in the mirror lately. I blinked in confusion. I asked him what he meant. He sighed softly. It was a sound of disappointment. He told me that I looked exhausted. He traced the line of my jaw and told me that the late nights and the stress of writing were taking a toll on my beauty. He told me that I was starting to look old. The words were said with such tenderness that it took a moment for the poison to sink in. He was not yelling. He was not forbidding me from writing. He was doing something far more insidious. He was weaponizing my own vanity and insecurity against me. He told me that he worked 18 hours a day so that I did not have to. He told me that his success was enough for both of us. He asked me why I wanted to torture myself with rejection letters and bad reviews and the stress of deadlines. He told me that my job was to be happy and radiant and beautiful. He told me to leave the ambition and the glory to him because he was built for the burden and I was built to be the prize. I remembered the shame that washed over me in that moment. I felt foolish. I felt like a little girl playing dress-up. I looked at the manuscript on his desk, and suddenly it did not look like an accomplishment. It looked like a waste of time. It looked like a pile of paper that was stealing my youth and making my husband worry. Grant kissed my forehead. He told me to go get some sleep. He told me to book a facial the next day. He told me that he loved me too much to watch me destroy myself for a silly hobby. I left the room without the manuscript. I left my dream on his desk, and I never picked it up again. That was the first invisible cut. It was clean and precise, and it severed the artery of my self-worth. I stopped writing. I started spending more time at the spa and the salon. I started trying to be the radiant prize he wanted. I thought I was being a good wife. Now I know I was being a good victim. The void shifted. The smell of scotch and leather faded and was replaced by the scent of espresso and expensive cologne. I was pulled into another memory. This one was recent. It was only 1 month before the accident. We were in the kitchen. Sunlight was streaming through the bay windows, illuminating the granite countertops and the stainless steel appliances. Grant was in a hurry. He was always in a hurry lately. He was buttoning his cuffs and checking his watch and drinking his espresso all at the same time. But that morning he seemed different. He seemed manic. There was a frenetic energy vibrating under his skin that I mistook for excitement. He pulled a folder out of his briefcase and slid it across the island counter toward me. He told me he had a surprise. I opened the folder. Inside was a brochure for a luxury spa weekend at a resort in the Willamette Valley. It was an extravagant gift. It was the kind of gift a husband gives when he wants to say thank you, or when he wants to say sorry. I looked up at him and smiled. I asked him what the occasion was. He laughed and said he just wanted to spoil me. He said I deserved a break. He came around the counter and kissed my cheek. His lips felt hot and dry. He told me that business was booming and he was closing a massive deal that would set us up for life. He told me he was restructuring some of our assets to protect our future. Then he slid a second stack of papers toward me. He told me that since he was moving some properties around, he needed my signature on a few things. He called it administrative housekeeping. He said it was just boring tax stuff and liability waivers for the new holding company. I looked at the stack of papers. The text was dense and small. Legal jargon swam before my eyes. In the past, I might have read them. I might have asked questions. But the conversation from 3 years ago still echoed in my mind. Leave the business to him. Leave the thinking to him. My job was to be the trusting wife who enjoyed the spa weekends. Grant handed me a pen. His hand was steady. My hand was not. I flipped through the pages. I signed where he pointed. I signed my name over and over again. Madeline Sterling. Madeline Sterling. Madeline Sterling. And then I came to a document that made me pause. It was an insurance policy. I saw the logo of a major life insurance firm at the top. I saw my name listed as the insured. I saw Grant listed as the sole beneficiary. I asked him why we needed a new policy. I told him we already had coverage. Grant did not blink. He did not hesitate. He had an answer ready. He told me that the new investors required higher collateral. He told me that because the business was expanding, our personal liability was higher. He said it was just a formality to secure the loan for the new waterfront project. He said it was standard procedure for people in our tax bracket. He tapped the paper with his finger. He pointed to the bottom line. I looked at the coverage amount. $2 million. It was a staggering sum. It was double what we had before. I felt a flicker of unease. It felt excessive. It felt like a price tag was being placed on my head. But Grant was smiling at me. He looked so handsome and so confident. He was the man who had built a commercial empire. He was the man who had taken care of me for 8 years. He was my husband. Don't worry your pretty head about it. That was the subtext of his smile. Trust me. So I trusted him. I pressed the pen to the paper. The ink flowed smooth and dark. I signed my name. I signed my death warrant in the middle of my beautiful kitchen while sipping a latte. Grant took the papers away the moment the ink was dry. He slipped them into his briefcase with the efficiency that should have terrified me. He checked his watch again. He told me he had to run. He told me to enjoy the spa. I watched him walk out the door. I watched him get into his car and drive away. I did not know that he was driving straight to his mistress to tell her that step 1 was complete. I did not know that the $2 million was not for collateral, but for a condo in the Pearl District and a new life without me. I did not know that I had just authorized him to kill me. These memories swirled around me in the darkness. The writing manuscript, the insurance papers, the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't looking. The signs were all there. They were huge neon signs flashing in the night. But I had closed my eyes. I had chosen the comfort of blindness over the pain of sight. The regret was a physical weight. It pressed down on my shattered chest. I wanted to scream. I wanted to travel back in time and shake that woman in the kitchen. I wanted to grab the pen from her hand and stab it into his hand. But I could not move. I could not scream. The memories faded. The sensation of floating ended abruptly. The darkness became heavy and solid. I felt pain returning. It started as a dull throb and grew into a roaring fire. My body was coming back to me. But it was a broken body. It was a prison of flesh and bone that Grant Sterling had designed for me. I was waking up, and the nightmare was just beginning. The first thing that returned to me was not a memory or a thought, but a sound. It was a rhythmic and mechanical sound that repeated with the precision of a metronome. Hiss, click, hiss, click. It was the sound of air being forced into a place where it did not want to go. For a long time, that sound was my entire universe. It was the only thing that existed in the void where I floated. I tried to push the sound away. I tried to turn over and bury my face in a pillow to drown it out, but I could not turn over. That was the first moment of terror. It was a quiet terror. It did not come with a scream because I could not scream. I tried to send the command to my arms. Move, push, lift. I sent the signal with every ounce of will I possessed. I screamed the instruction in the silence of my mind. But my arms did not answer. They felt heavy. They felt like lead weights that had been sewn to the sheets. They felt dead. I tried to open my eyes. My eyelids felt as if they had been glued shut with industrial adhesive. I strained against the darkness. I focused all my energy on the tiny muscles that controlled my vision. Slowly and painfully, my right eye cracked open. The light was blinding. It was a harsh and artificial white light that stabbed into my brain like an ice pick. I wanted to blink. I wanted to squeeze my eyes shut to protect myself from the glare, but I could not blink. My eye remained fixed and staring. It was unblinking and watery. I was lying on my back. Above me was a grid of white ceiling tiles. One of them had a water stain that looked like a bruised continent. To my left was a tower of machines. They were blinking with red and green lights. They were the source of the sound. Hiss, click. A plastic tube snaked from the machine and disappeared somewhere below my chin. I realized with a jolt of horror that the tube was inside me. It was jammed down my throat. It was breathing for me. My chest rose and fell, not because I willed it to, but because the machine demanded it. I was in a hospital. That much was clear. But why could I not move? Panic began to rise in me like a flood. It started in my stomach and clawed its way up to my throat. I tried to thrash. I tried to kick my legs. I tried to jerk my head from side to side. I wanted to rip the tube out. I wanted to sit up and demand to know what was happening. Nothing moved. Not a finger. Not a toe. Not a muscle in my neck. I was a statue. I was a corpse that had forgotten to die. The panic turned into a frenzy. Inside my skull, I was screaming. I was thrashing and fighting and clawing at the walls of my own body. But outside, I was perfectly still. I was a picture of serenity. The only sign of my internal war was the frantic beeping of the heart monitor that began to accelerate. Beep, 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 beep. A face appeared above me. It was a nurse, but I did not know her. She had tired eyes and she smelled of stale coffee and latex. She looked down at me not with concern, but with clinical detachment. She checked the machine. She adjusted a dial. She did not look into my eyes. She looked at the monitors. Her heart rate is spiking. She said to someone I could not see, "She must be in pain or just reacting to the stimulus." "I am here," I screamed in my head. "Look at me. I am right here. I am awake. Let us up the sedative," another voice said. "Keep her stable." "No!" I screamed silently. "Do not sedate me. Talk to me. Tell me what is wrong with me." But they did not hear me. They could not hear the voice that was raging inside the bone cage of my skull. I felt a cold sensation spread through my veins as something was injected into my IV line. The panic dulled. The edges of my mind grew fuzzy. The ceiling tiles blurred. But the horror remained. I was trapped. I was buried alive in my own flesh. Time lost its meaning after that. I did not know if it was day or night. I drifted in and out of consciousness. But the physical torture was constant. The worst part was the itch. It started as a tiny tickle on the side of my nose. It was insignificant at first, just a minor irritation. But because I could not scratch it, the sensation began to grow. It bloomed into a fiery torment. It felt as if an insect was crawling slowly across my skin. It felt like a spark of fire was burning a hole in my face. I focused everything on my hand. I visualized my index finger lifting. I visualized my arm bending. I visualized the sheer ecstasy of scratching that itch. I commanded my body. I pleaded with it. I bargained with God. If you let me move my hand, I will never complain again. I will be a better person. Just let me scratch my nose, please." But my hand lay dead by my side. The itch became a maddening torture. It consumed my entire reality. I would have sold my soul to the devil in that moment for 5 seconds of movement. I wanted to cry. I wanted to weep tears of frustration, but even my tear ducts seemed to be paralyzed. My eyes burned with dryness. They felt like sandpaper rubbing against glass. My throat was a desert. The ventilator tube was a foreign invader that chafed against my windpipe with every mechanical breath. Hiss. Click. It was a rhythmic violation. My mouth tasted of plastic and bitter bile. I could not swallow. I could not wet my lips. I was parched and itching and frozen. Then came the doctors. I heard them before I saw them. They walked with the heavy footsteps of authority. They surrounded my bed like a council of giants. I recognized one of them. Dr. Vance. He was an older man with silver hair and a face that looked like it was carved from granite. He had treated Grant for a minor issue years ago. I tried to catch his eye. I tried to shout his name with my mind. "Dr. Vance, help me. It is me. Madeline." He stood over me and shined a penlight into my eyes. The light was blinding. I felt my pupils contract, but I could not look away. He lifted my arm and let it drop. It fell onto the mattress with a heavy thud. It did not feel like my arm. It felt like a piece of meat. He turned to the other people in the room. He spoke about me in the third person. He spoke about me as if I was not there. "The patient has suffered catastrophic damage to the brainstem," Dr. Vance said. His voice was deep and grave. "The scans show a complete severance of the motor pathways. We are seeing some autonomic function, which is why her heart is beating and her digestion is working. But the higher cortical functions appear to be disconnected from the physical body." "What does that mean?" a voice asked. It was a nurse. "It means she is in a persistent vegetative state," Dr. Vance said. The words hit me harder than the car crash. Vegetative state. "No!" I screamed inside. "No, that is wrong. I am listening to you. I can hear every word. I can feel the itch on my nose. I can feel the pain in my shattered pelvis. I am not a vegetable. I am a person. It is unlikely she has any awareness of her surroundings." Dr. Vance continued. His voice was the sound of a coffin lid slamming shut. "The lights are on, but nobody is home. The brain damage is severe. She feels no pain. She has no thoughts. She is merely existing." He was wrong. He was so incredibly wrong. I felt everything. I felt the crushing weight of his words. I felt the absolute terror of being erased while I was still present. I wanted to grab him by the lapels of his white coat and shake him. I wanted to tell him that I was screaming his name. But I lay perfectly still. My face was a mask of slack muscles. My eyes stared blankly at the water stain on the ceiling. To them, I was an empty shell, a husk. They discussed my prognosis. They used words like minimal brain activity and quality of life and long-term care. They talked about me like a broken appliance that might need to be discarded. I realized then the true depth of my hell. It was not just that I was paralyzed. It was that no one knew I was there. I was a ghost haunting my own body. I was screaming into a void that no one else could see. I was alone, completely and utterly alone in a room full of people. If the paralysis was a physical prison, then the way people treated me was a psychological flaying. In the days that followed, I lost my humanity. I ceased to be Madeline Hart. I ceased to be a woman with a master's degree and a favorite color and a history. I became the patient in bed 4. I became a chore. I became a slab of meat that needed to be watered and rotated. The nurses who attended to me in those early days were not cruel in a deliberate way. They were cruel in the way a butcher is cruel to a side of beef. It was indifference. It was efficiency devoid of empathy. There were 2 of them who came in every morning to wash me. I learned their names from their chatter. One was Jessica, and the other was Brittany. They would storm into my room and turn on the overhead lights without warning. They would pull back the sheets and strip off my hospital gown, exposing my naked, broken body to the cold air. They never spoke to me. They never said good morning. They never explained what they were going to do. They spoke over me. "Did you see what Chad posted on Instagram last night?" Jessica asked as she took a rough washcloth and began to scrub my arm. She rubbed hard, her nails dug into my skin. "Yeah," Brittany replied. She was changing the bag on my catheter. She handled the intimate parts of my body with a casual roughness that made me want to die of shame. "He is such a loser. I do not know why you are still talking to him." "I know," Jessica sighed. She flipped my heavy, limp body onto its side so she could wash my back. My head lolled forward and my cheek smashed against the plastic rail of the bed. Pain shot through my neck. They did not notice. But he has that boat. And summer is coming. They discussed their dates and their diets and their hangovers while they scrubbed my genitals and changed my sheets. I was right there. I was listening to every word. But to them, I was just furniture. I was an object that required maintenance. I wanted to bite them. I wanted to spit in their faces. I wanted to demand the dignity of privacy. But I lay there naked and exposed and silent. I learned that shame is a luxury for the living. When you are a vegetable, you have no rights, you have no modesty, you are just biological matter. And then Grant came. I had been dreading his arrival and craving it at the same time. Part of me, the foolish part that still clung to the memories of our early years, hoped that he would see me. I hoped that because he was my husband, because he knew every inch of my face, he would see the spark of life in my eyes that the doctors had missed. I heard his footsteps in the hallway. I knew that walk. It was the confident, rhythmic stride of a man who owned the ground he walked on. The door opened. The first thing that hit me was his smell. It was a wave of expensive sandalwood cologne mixed with the faint metallic tang of rain. It was the smell of my life before. It was the smell of safety. For a split second, my heart leaped. Grant! He walked to the side of the bed. He looked immaculate. He was wearing a charcoal gray suit that was perfectly tailored. His hair was styled. He looked like he had just stepped out of a boardroom meeting. He looked down at me. His face crumpled. It was a masterpiece of acting. His brow furrowed. His lips trembled. His eyes filled with tears that did not quite spill over. "Oh God, Maddie," he whispered. His voice broke perfectly on my name. He reached out and took my hand. This was the moment. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The touch of the man I had loved for a decade. But as his skin made contact with mine, I felt something cold slither down my spine. His hand was warm, but his touch was empty. It was not the touch of a lover. It was not the touch of a husband reaching for his wife in her darkest hour. It was a prop. I felt his fingers tighten around mine. It was not a squeeze of comfort. It was a squeeze of possession. It felt rigid. It felt like he was holding a dead fish. He was not looking at me. I realized that with a sudden sickening clarity. He was looking past me. He was looking at Dr. Vance, who was standing in the doorway. Is she in pain?" Grant asked. He sounded choked up. He sounded devastated. "No, Mr. Sterling," Dr. Vance said softly. "As I explained, she is not processing pain. She is not aware." Grant let out a shuddering breath. He brought my hand to his lips and kissed my knuckles. I felt the wetness of his mouth. It made my skin crawl. This was the man who had told me to stop writing because it made me look old. This was the man who had asked me to sign a $2 million life insurance policy a month ago. "This feels like a nightmare," Grant said. He stroked my hair. His hand was heavy on my skull. "I cannot believe this is happening. She was my everything. She was my whole world." "Liar!" I screamed in my mind. "You liar, you selfish, narcissistic bastard." I watched him perform. I watched him play the role of the grieving widower. He was good. He was very good. He asked the right questions. He shed the right amount of tears. He slumped his shoulders in just the right way to show the weight of his burden. But I knew him. I knew the tiny tick in his jaw when he was lying. I knew the way his eyes went flat when he was calculating a deal. And right now, as he looked at my broken body, he was not seeing his wife. He was calculating. He was looking at an asset that was depreciating. He was looking at a problem that needed to be solved. He leaned in close to my face. To Dr. Vance, it looked like a tender moment of intimacy, a husband saying goodbye to his wife. But as his face hovered inches from mine, I saw it. I saw the look in his eyes. It was not grief. It was not love. It was impatience. He looked at me with a cold, dead stare. There was a flicker of annoyance there. "Why aren't you dead yet?" That was what his eyes were saying. "Why are you still breathing?" My hand was still trapped in his. I wanted to rip it away. I wanted to claw his eyes out. I wanted to shout the truth to Dr. Vance. He did this. He made me sign those papers. He sent me out in the rain. But I was frozen. I was locked in the coffin of my own body. Grant straightened up. He wiped a tear from his cheek. He turned to Dr. Vance. "What are our options?" he asked. His voice was steady now, businesslike. "We will monitor her for a few weeks," Dr. Vance said. "But if there is no change in her brain activity, we may have to discuss long-term care or other measures. Other measures. Death. They were talking about killing me." "I understand," Grant said. He looked back at me one last time. He patted my hand. 2 sharp pats, like one would pat a dog. "We will do what is best for Maddie, whatever she would have wanted." He squeezed my hand one last time. Hard. It hurt. "I will be back tomorrow," he said. He turned and walked out of the room. I watched his retreating back. I watched the man who had promised to love me in sickness and in health walk away to plan my murder. And as the door closed, leaving me alone with the hissing machine and the indifferent nurses, I realized something. The accident had not killed me. Grant had not killed me. Not yet. But the Madeline Hart, who had loved him, she was dead. She had died the moment she felt the cold calculation in his touch, and in her place something else was beginning to take root. A cold, hard seed of hatred that would keep me alive when everything else failed. I was a vegetable, I was a corpse, I was a victim, but I was also a witness, and I was going to make sure that counted for something. The 4th day brought a new kind of torture. It was not the physical pain of my shattered ribs or the terrifying paralysis of my limbs. It was the arrival of the players in the final act of my life. I heard them before I saw them. I heard the heavy, confident stride of my husband, Grant Sterling, and accompanying him was a different sound. It was the sharp and staccato click of high heels on the hospital linoleum. Click, click, click. It was a sound of youth and arrogance. It was the sound of a woman who believed she owned the world. The door opened. The air in the room shifted instantly. The antiseptic smell of the hospital was assaulted by a wave of cloying floral perfume. It was cheap and sweet. It smelled like vanilla and desperation. I knew that scent. It belonged to Ivy Summers. Grant walked to the foot of my bed. He was wearing his navy suit. He looked tired, but it was a curated tiredness. It was the exhaustion of a man who wanted sympathy. Ivy stood beside him. She was 24 years old and possessed the kind of beauty that is loud and demanding. Her blonde hair was perfectly blown out. Her dress was inappropriate for a hospital visit. It was too short and too bright, Dr. Vance was finishing his rounds. He nodded solemnly at Grant. "Take as much time as you need, Mr. Sterling," Dr. Vance said. "We will be just outside." "Thank you, Doctor," Grant said. His voice was thick with unshed tears. "I just need a moment alone with her, to say goodbye." The door clicked shut. The heavy magnetic lock engaged. For a count of 3 seconds there was silence. Then the atmosphere in the room changed so violently it felt like a drop in air pressure. The shoulders of the grieving husband straightened. The mask of sorrow vanished. Grant let out a long breath that sounded more like annoyance than grief. "Is she gone?" Ivy asked. Her voice was not a whisper. It was a normal conversational volume. It was the voice of a woman who did not care if the corpse in the bed could hear her. "Yeah," Grant said. He walked over to the window and looked out at the gray Portland skyline. "The nurse said she is basically a vegetable. No brain activity. Nothing." Ivy giggled. It was a horrifying sound. It bubbled up from her throat like toxic sludge. She walked over to the side of my bed. I could not move my eyes to track her, but I could feel her presence. She stood so close that her perfume made my throat itch. I felt the mattress depress as she sat down on the edge of the bed. She sat on my bed. She treated my paralyzed body like a park bench. The disrespect was so visceral it made my blood boil. I wanted to kick her off. I wanted to scream at her to get her cheap polyester dress off my dying legs. But I lay still. I stared at the water stain on the ceiling while the mistress of my husband made herself comfortable on my deathbed. "So this is her," Ivy said. She reached out and touched the plastic tubing of my ventilator. I felt the vibration travel down into my throat. It was a violation. She flicked the tube with her fingernail. Tick, tick. "She looks terrible, Grant. I mean really terrible." "She was in a car crash, Ivy," Grant said without turning around. "She hit a concrete wall at 55 miles per hour. She is not going to look like a pageant queen." Ivy sighed. She began to drum her fingers on the plastic railing of the bed. Tap, tap, tap. My hearing was so amplified that each tap sounded like a gunshot. "When is it going to be over?" Ivy asked. "I am sick of waiting. You said it would be quick." "Soon," Grant said. He turned from the window and walked toward us. Dr. Vance said if there is no improvement in 24 hours, we can talk about pulling the plug. Pulling the plug. They discussed ending my life with the same casual tone one might use to discuss canceling a cable subscription. Grant stood on the other side of the bed. He looked down at me. But he was not looking at me. He was looking at Ivy. I could see the hunger in his eyes. It was a look he used to give me 10 years ago. Now he was directing it at a woman who was half his age and possessed none of my intellect. "Come here," Grant said. His voice dropped an octave. It was husky and rough. Ivy stood up. The mattress shifted again. I heard the rustle of clothing. I heard the intake of breath. And then, right there over my paralyzed body, they came together. I could hear everything. The sound was magnified 1,000 times by my inability to focus on anything else. I heard the wet, sloppy sound of their lips meeting. Smack, slurp. It was repugnant. It sounded like raw meat being slapped against a counter. I heard the exchange of saliva. I heard the soft moan that escaped Ivy's throat. Grant. Not here," she whispered, but she did not pull away. "Who cares?" he muttered against her neck. "She can't see us. She can't hear us. She is just a shell." He leaned over the bed to kiss her again. His jacket brushed against my arm. I could smell him. He smelled of coffee and mints and betrayal. I could smell her vanilla perfume mixing with his musk. It was a nauseating cocktail. My stomach clenched. A wave of bile rose in my throat. I wanted to vomit. I prayed to vomit. If I could just retch, if I could just projectile vomit all over his expensive Italian suit, he would know I was there. He would know I was alive. But my stomach muscles were dead. The bile burned the back of my throat, but went no further. I was forced to swallow the taste of my own sickness while listening to my husband make out with his mistress. They kissed for what felt like an eternity. The sounds of their pleasure filled the small room. The sucking, the heavy breathing, the friction of fabric on fabric. It was the ultimate desecration. He was not just killing me, he was dancing on my grave before I was even in it. Finally, they broke apart. Ivy smoothed her dress. Grant adjusted his tie. "You are bad," Ivy said with a giggle. "I am doing this for us," Grant said. He reached out and stroked her cheek. "Just a little longer, baby. Then we will have the money. We will have the condo. We will have everything." I lay there and I listened. And in the silence of my mind, I made a vow. I vowed that if I ever regained the power of speech, the first thing I would do was scream, and the second thing I would do was destroy them. The atmosphere in the room shifted from lust to business. Ivy sat back down on the chair near the window. Grant paced the small floor. I could count his steps. 1, 2, 3, turn. 1, 2, 3, turn. "Are you sure the police are done?" Ivy asked. Her voice had lost its playful edge. It was sharp with anxiety. "Yes," Grant said. He sounded impatient. "I told you. They ruled it an accident. It was a rainy night. The roads were slick. It happens all the time." "But the brakes," Ivy pressed. "What if they check the brakes?" Grant stopped pacing. He let out a short, arrogant laugh. "Baby," he said. "The front of that car is an accordion. The engine block is sitting in the passenger seat. There is nothing left to check. Besides, I did not cut them all the way." My heart, which was beating mechanically in my chest, seemed to stutter. This was it. This was the confirmation. I just nicked them. Grant continued. His voice was full of pride. It was the voice of a man explaining a clever investment strategy. I used a file. I weakened the line just enough so that it would hold under normal pressure, but in a panic stop, like when a truck cuts you off in the rain. Snap. He made a snapping sound with his fingers. It was brilliant, he said. I watched a tutorial online. It took me 10 minutes. 10 minutes. 10 minutes to erase 8 years of marriage. 10 minutes to decide that my life was worth less than his freedom. I felt a cold rage spreading through my veins. It was colder than the paralysis. You are sure she didn't suspect anything? Ivy asked. Sarah was clueless, Grant said. He used my name, but it sounded like a slur. She was walking around in a daze half the time, too busy mourning her failed writing career to notice anything real. She signed the insurance increase without even reading the fine print. She trusted me. The way he said it made trust sound like a defect, like a weakness that deserved to be exploited. Suddenly there was a noise from the hallway. It was the heavy squeak of a cartwheel and the murmur of voices. A nurse was coming. Grant reacted instantly. Shh, he hissed at Ivy. Look sad. He rushed to my bedside. He needed to be seen comforting his dying wife. He leaned over me. He placed his hands on the railing and brought his face close to mine. He arranged his features into a mask of tragic devotion. I love you so much, Maddie. He whispered loud enough for the door to hear, but quiet enough to seem intimate. As he leaned over, his suit jacket fell open. He was wearing a crisp white shirt. In the breast pocket of his shirt was his smartphone. The fabric of the pocket was thin. The phone was facing outward. And then it happened. The phone lit up. A notification arrived. Because his chest was inches from my face, the screen was directly in my line of sight. It was the only thing I could see. My unblinking eye focused on the glowing rectangle. It was a notification from his banking app. The text was crisp and black against the white background. Transaction declined. Account ending in 4092. Status overdraft. Balance $9,600. Please deposit funds immediately to avoid penalties. The world stopped. Negative $9,600. I stared at the number. I knew our finances, or I thought I did. Grant always told me we were wealthy. He told me his company was worth millions. He told me the Pearl District house was paid off. He told me we had investments and portfolios and safety nets. He was lying. He was lying about everything. The realization hit me with the force of a second car crash. He was not just killing me for a new start with a younger woman. That would have been a crime of passion. This was a crime of necessity. He was broke. He was bankrupt. The pieces of the puzzle slammed together in my mind. The frenzy to close deals, the stress he had been hiding, the sudden need to increase my life insurance policy to $2 million. He needed the money. He needed my death to cover his debts. He needed to liquidate my life to save his ego. He would sell the house. He would claim the $2 million. He would pay off the overdrafts and the loans, and he would pretend he was still the successful tycoon. He was killing me to save face. I looked at the notification until the screen went dark. Grant did not notice. He was too busy performing his grief for the audience in the hallway. He kissed my forehead. His lips were dry. "Hang in there, baby," he whispered. But the subtext was clear. Die. Please just die so I can pay my bills. The nurse did not come in. The cart rolled past the door. The danger passed. Grant straightened up. He checked his watch. "We should go," he said to Ivy. "I have a meeting with the lawyers at 4. We need to start the probate process as soon as Dr. Vance calls it." They left the room. They left me alone with the truth. The truth was uglier than I could have imagined. I had thought I was the victim of a wandering eye. I had thought I was the victim of a midlife crisis. But it was so much worse. I was a financial asset being liquidated. I was a line item on a balance sheet that needed to be balanced. Grant Sterling was not a powerful man. He was a failure. He was a fraud. And he was a coward who would rather murder the woman who supported him than admit he had lost his money. I lay there in the silence, and I felt something shift inside me. The fear was still there. The pain was still there. But the despair was gone. In its place was a cold, hard determination. He wanted my money. He wanted my silence. He wanted to erase me. But he had made a mistake. He had left me alive. And he had let me see the one thing that could destroy him. I knew his secret. I knew he was desperate, and as the machine pumped air into my lungs, I made a promise to the universe. I would not die. I would not let him win. I would survive this, and I would take everything from him, every penny, every lie, every scrap of his fake reputation. He wanted a war. He had one. The night that followed the revelation of Grant's bankruptcy and his murderous plot was the longest night of my life. It was a darkness that had nothing to do with the setting of the sun. It was a spiritual eclipse. I lay there in the silence, broken only by the hiss and click of the ventilator, and I stared into the abyss. For the first few hours after they left, I wanted to die. It was a seductive thought. It was a soft and velvet comfort that whispered to me in the dark. Death would be so easy. It would be the ultimate release. If I just stopped fighting, if I just let my mind drift away into the gray fog that hovered at the edges of my consciousness, if I let go of the tether that bound my soul to this broken, useless body, then the pain would stop, the itching would stop, the humiliation of being treated like a slab of meat would end. I would not have to witness Grant and Ivy spending my money. I would not have to feel the crushing weight of my own stupidity for trusting him. I thought about the peace of non-existence. I imagined it as a cool, dark water closing over my head. No more betrayal, no more grief, no more machines breathing for me. I could just slip away. I could let Grant win. He wanted me dead. He had planned for it. He had counted on it. If I died tonight, I would be giving him exactly what he wanted. He would get the sympathy of our friends. He would play the grieving widower at the funeral. He would collect the $2 million. He would pay off his debts and buy the penthouse and take Ivy to Bali. He would erase me. The thought of his victory played in my mind like a film on a loop. I saw him standing at my graveside looking handsome in black. I saw him squeezing out a fake tear while checking his watch. I saw him toasting with champagne in the first-class cabin of a plane with Ivy giggling beside him. I saw them living in luxury on the ashes of my life. I saw him laughing. That was the image that stopped me. I saw Grant laughing. I saw the relief on his face. I saw the arrogance. He thought he was so smart. He thought he had committed the perfect crime. He thought I was weak. He thought I was just a naive teacher who wrote bad novels and signed whatever he put in front of her. He thought I was nothing. And that was when the shift happened. It started as a spark deep in my gut. It was a tiny ember of heat in the frozen wasteland of my body. It was not hope. Hope is too soft a word for what I felt. It was rage, pure, unadulterated, blackened rage. It was a fury so intense that it felt like it should have set the bedsheets on fire. How dare he? How dare he take my life and use it as currency to fix his mistakes? How dare he bring that woman into my room and disrespect me while I lay helpless? How dare he think he could get away with it? If I died now, I would be letting him get away with murder. Literally. I would be the final accessory to his crime. My death would be the signature on the check that cleared his debts. No. The words screamed through my mind. It was louder than the ventilator. It was louder than the despair. No. I will not give him that satisfaction. I will not be his victim. I will not be his stepping stone. I looked at the water stain on the ceiling, and I made a choice. It was a choice that terrified me because I did not know how I would execute it. I was paralyzed. I was mute. I was helpless. But I was alive. My heart was beating. My brain was firing. And as long as there was breath in my lungs, even if it was pumped there by a machine, I had a weapon. I had the truth. I knew what he had done. I knew about the breaks, I knew about the money, I knew about Ivy. I just needed a way to get it out. I stopped praying for death. I started praying for a miracle. I needed an ally. I needed someone to look at me and see a person instead of a prognosis. I needed someone to notice that the lights were on inside the house. I focused my mind. I sharpened my thoughts like knives. I would not drift. I would not sleep. I would wait. I would watch. And the moment someone looked at me closely enough, the moment someone gave me an opening, I would take it. Grant Sterling had made a mistake. He had assumed that Madeline Hart was soft. He had assumed that because I loved him, I was weak. But he had forgotten something. I was a writer. I knew how to construct a narrative, and I was not going to let him write the ending of my story. I was going to write it myself, and it was going to be a tragedy for him. The rage became my fuel. It burned away the depression. It burned away the self-pity. It left me with a cold, hard purpose. I was going to survive, and I was going to make him pay. The miracle arrived the next morning at 7 o'clock. Her name was Nina Rossi. She was different from the other nurses the moment she walked through the door. She did not slam it open. She turned the handle gently. She did not turn on the blinding overhead lights immediately. She turned on the soft lamp by the sink first. She did not smell of stale smoke or cheap perfume. She smelled of soap and peppermint. "Good morning, Madeline," she said softly. She used my name, not Mrs. Sterling. Not the patient. Madeline. She walked over to the bed and looked at me. Really looked at me. Her eyes were dark and kind and intelligent. She did not look at the monitors first. She looked at my face. "My name is Nina," she said. "I am going to be your nurse today. I know this is hard. I know you are probably scared, but I am going to take good care of you." She reached out and touched my arm. Her hand was warm. Her touch was gentle. It was respectful. It was the first time in 2 weeks that someone had touched me without treating me like a piece of furniture. "I'm going to check your vitals, and then we will get you cleaned up," she explained. "I'm going to talk you through everything I do, so you are not surprised. Is that okay?" I could not answer, but the question itself was a gift. She was asking for my consent, even though she knew I could not give it. She was acknowledging my humanity. Nina moved efficiently around the room. She checked the IV bags. She noted the numbers on the ventilator. She adjusted the pillows that were digging into my neck. "Okay, Madeline," she said. "I am going to wash your face now. The water is warm." She dipped a soft cloth into a basin. She wrung it out and brought it to my face. She wiped my forehead gently. She cleaned around my eyes with a tenderness that made my heart ache. She cleaned my cheeks and my chin. As she worked, she hummed a soft tune. It was a lullaby. It was so human, so normal, that it broke something inside me. The dam that I had built to hold back my terror and my grief finally cracked. I felt the sting in my eyes. I felt the pressure building behind my eyelids. I tried to stop it. I did not want to cry. Crying was useless. Crying was weak, but I could not stop it. A single tear leaked out of the corner of my right eye. It was hot and salty. It slid down my temple and pooled in my ear. Then another followed, and another. I was crying. I was crying for the life I had lost. I was crying for the woman I used to be. I was crying because this stranger was being kind to me when my own husband had tried to kill me. Nina stopped washing. Her hand froze on my cheek. She leaned in closer. Her face was inches from mine. She did not wipe the tears away immediately. She watched them fall. Her eyes widened. She looked at my eyes. "Madeline," she whispered. She stared at me with an intensity that frightened me. She was searching for something. She was looking for the ghost in the machine. Most nurses would have wiped the tears and assumed it was a reflex. They would have said it was just the eyes lubricating themselves. But Nina was different. She saw the emotion in the tears. She saw the anguish. Are you in there?" she asked. Her voice was barely a breath. "Yes," I screamed in my head. "Yes, I am here. Please see me. Please help me." Nina bit her lip. She looked at the monitors. My heart rate was elevated. She looked back at me. "Okay," she said. "This might sound crazy, but if you can hear me, Madeline, if you can understand what I am saying, I need you to give me a sign." She paused. She looked at my motionless body. She looked at my hands, my feet, my face. "Can you blink?" she asked. "Can you blink for me? Just once. Try to close your eyes." This was it. This was the moment. The universe had opened a door. I had to walk through it. I focused everything I had on my eyelids. I visualized the muscles. I remembered what it felt like to blink. It used to be automatic. It used to be as easy as breathing. Now it felt like I was trying to lift a car with my eyelashes. I pushed. I strained. I sent every electrical impulse in my brain to that one tiny cluster of nerves. Close, close, close. Nothing happened. My eyes remained staring and wide. Panic flared. What if I couldn't do it? What if I was truly locked in forever? What if Nina gave up and walked away? No, I would not let that happen. Come on, Madeline, Nina whispered. She sounded like she was praying. I know you are in there. I can see it in your eyes. Just try. One blink. I tried again. I gathered the rage I had felt the night before. I gathered the hatred for Grant. I gathered the love for my sister. I gathered the desperate need to survive. I balled it all up into a tight fist of energy, and I hurled it at my eyelids. Blink. I felt a tremble, a tiny microscopic flutter, and then darkness. For a split second, the white ceiling disappeared. My eyelids came down. They met in the middle, and then they opened again. I had done it. I had blinked. Nina gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. She staggered back a step as if she had seen a ghost. "Oh my God," she said. "Oh my God." She rushed back to the side of the bed. She grabbed the railing. Her eyes were shining with tears. "Do it again," she pleaded. "Please, Madeline, do it again so I know I am not imagining it. Blink if you can hear me." I was exhausted. That one blink had taken as much energy as running a marathon. But I could not stop now. I had to confirm it. I focused again. I found the pathway. The road was open now. It was difficult, but it was passable. Close. My eyelids fluttered shut and opened. Nina let out a sob, a sound of pure joy and shock. She reached out and took my hand. She squeezed it, and this time the squeeze was not a test. It was a handshake. It was a promise. "You are here," she said. Tears were streaming down her face now, mixing with the tears on mine. "You have been here the whole time." She looked around the room frantically. "I need to get the doctor," she said. "I need to tell Dr. Vance." No, I panicked. If she told the doctor might tell Grant. And if Grant knew I was awake before I could tell anyone the truth, he would kill me. He would find a way. He would pull the plug immediately. He would smother me with a pillow. I had to stop her. I blinked rapidly. I tried to move my eyes side to side. Nina stopped. She saw the panic in my gaze. She was smart. She realized immediately that something was wrong. "Wait," she said. She sat down on the edge of the bed. She looked deep into my eyes. "You are scared." I blinked once. "Yes." "You do not want me to get the doctor yet." I blinked once. "Yes." Nina frowned. She was processing this. She was a nurse. Her instinct was to report a change in condition. But she was also a human being, connecting with another human being who was in terror. Is it about your husband?" she asked. I stared at her. How did she know? Perhaps she had seen his performance. Perhaps she had felt the bad vibes. Or perhaps she just saw the sheer terror in my eyes when she mentioned telling people. I blinked once. A slow, deliberate yes. Nina went very still. The air in the room seemed to drop in temperature. She looked at the door, then she looked back at me. Her expression changed. The softness remained, but underneath it was a core of steel. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, Madeline. We will keep this between us for now, just you and me." She squeezed my hand again. "I am going to help you," she promised. "We are going to figure out a way for you to talk to me, and then you are going to tell me everything." She wiped the tears from my face. "You are not alone anymore," she said. "I have got you." And in that moment, as I looked into the eyes of this stranger who had saved me simply by paying attention, I knew that I was going to win. I had an army of one, and that was all I needed to start the war. The pact was sealed with a squeeze of a hand, but the mechanics of our revolution were agonizingly slow. Nina dragged a plastic chair close to the bedside. She sat with her knees pressing against the metal frame of the bed. Her face was a map of concentration. She looked at me, not as a patient to be managed, but as a puzzle to be solved. "We need a system," she whispered. Her voice was low and conspiratorial. She kept glancing at the door as if expecting the Grim Reaper himself to walk in wearing an Italian suit. We need to keep it simple because I can see how tired you are. I was beyond tired. I was exhausted in a way that transcended physical fatigue. It was a soul-deep weariness. Every synapse in my brain felt frayed. The effort of those first few blinks had drained my battery to critical levels, but I could not stop. Stopping meant silence. Silence meant death. "Here is the rule," Nina said. She held up one finger. "One blink means yes." She held up two fingers. "Two blinks means no." "Do you understand?" I gathered my strength. I focused on the heavy curtains of my eyelids. They felt like they were made of lead. I commanded them to fall. "Blink. Yes. Good." Nina smiled. It was a small, fragile smile, but it was the most beautiful thing I had seen in weeks. "Okay, let us practice. Are you in physical pain right now?" I focused again. This was harder. I had to interrupt the motion. Close, open, close, open, blink, blink. No. The relief on Nina's face was visible. "That is good. That is really good." "Okay, next question. Do you remember the accident?" "Blink?" "Yes." "Do you know where you are?" "Blink?" "Yes." Nina let out a breath she had been holding. "You are fully cognizant. You are completely all there." I blinked once. Hard. "Yes, I am here. I am screaming. I am burning with rage." We continued this binary dance for 10 minutes. But with every question, the physical toll mounted. My eyelids began to spasm. The muscles around my eyes, which had been dormant for 2 weeks, were protesting against the sudden demand. A headache began to bloom behind my forehead. It felt like a spike being driven into my skull. My vision blurred. The tears returned not from emotion this time, but from sheer strain. Nina noticed. She saw the tremor in my lower lid. She saw the way my breathing hitched in the ventilator tube. "You are exhausted," she said. "We should stop for now." "No." I panicked. 2 blinks. 2 rapid, desperate blinks. "No, we cannot stop. We have not gotten to the important part yet. I have not told you about him." Nina frowned. "Madeline, you are shaking. We have time. 2 blinks. No, we do not have time. He could kill me tomorrow. He could sign the papers tonight." Suddenly a sound cut through the quiet hum of the room. It was a rhythm I knew better than my own heartbeat. Click, clack, click, clack. It was the sound of leather soles on linoleum. It was the confident, heavy stride of Grant Sterling. Fear is a cold thing. It washed over me like ice water. My heart monitor began to pick up speed. Beep, beep, beep. Nina froze. She heard it too. She looked at the door and then back at me. She saw the terror in my eyes. "Is that him?" she whispered. 1 blink. "Yes." "Okay," Nina said. Her voice turned professional instantly. She stood up and kicked the chair back to its corner. She grabbed a chart and smoothed her expression. "Play dead, Madeline. Go back to sleep. Do not let him see." I understood. I had to put the mask back on. I had to retreat into the void. I relaxed my eyelids. I unfocused my gaze. I let my jaw go slack. I erased the intelligence from my face and became the vegetable he wanted me to be. The door opened. Grant walked in. He was holding a cup of coffee. He looked annoyed. He looked at Nina and then at me. "Everything okay?" he asked. I heard the monitor speeding up from the hallway. Nina did not flinch. She was a better actor than I gave her credit for. She checked the IV bag with steady hands. "She is just reacting to the suctioning procedure, Mr. Sterling." Nina lied smoothly. "It is a physiological response. Her heart rate spikes when we clear the tube. It is settling down now." Grant walked over to the bed. He stood exactly where Nina had been sitting moments ago. He looked down at me. I stared past him at the water stain. I forced myself not to blink. I forced myself not to look at the pocket where he kept his phone. I forced myself to be nothing. "She looks worse," Grant said. He took a sip of his coffee. "She looks thinner. She is stable," Nina said. Her voice was cool. "Stable." Grant scoffed. "That is a funny word for it." He reached out and brushed a stray hair from my forehead. His fingers were cold. I did not flinch. I did not blink. I let him touch me with his murderer's hands, and I played the corpse. "I hate seeing her like this," Grant said. "It is cruel to keep her going. Do not you think he was testing Nina? He was looking for an ally in his decision to kill me. I think she is fighting, Nina said. She looked Grant dead in the eye. I think she is still in there somewhere. Grant's eyes narrowed. For a second, the mask slipped. I saw the flash of irritation. I saw the predator assess a threat. Maybe, he said. Or maybe that is just what we tell ourselves to feel better. He stayed for 20 minutes. He checked his emails. He complained about the rain. He ignored me completely after that first touch. But for me, those 20 minutes were an eternity of torture. My eyes burned. The urge to blink was a physical agony. I had to fight the natural reflex every single second. I had to suppress the life force that was trying to scream. When he finally left, I was trembling. Nina locked the door behind him. She rushed to my side. "You did great," she whispered. "You were perfect." I blinked, once, long and slow. It was a blink of survival. But I knew we could not play this game forever. I needed to tell her. I needed to give her the weapon that would destroy him. 5.2. The Alphabet and the Message in Blood. Nina returned an hour later. She carried a clipboard, but instead of medical charts, she had a piece of paper with a grid printed on it. She had drawn the alphabet in bold black marker. The letters were arranged in 4 rows. "Okay," she said. She pulled the chair back. "This is going to be tedious, Madeline, but it is the only way. I'm going to point to a row. You blink if the letter you want is in that row. Then I will point to each letter in that row. You blink when I hit the right one." I stared at the grid. It looked like a Ouija board. It was a tool to speak with the dead, and in a way that is exactly what I was. "Ready?" Nina asked. Blink. She pointed to the first row, A through G. Blink. Okay. First row. Is it A, B, C, D, blink? D. Nina wrote it down. Next letter. First row. Blink. A blink. A, D, A. We worked in silence. The only sounds were the ventilator and the scratch of her pen. It was agonizingly slow. My eyes watered. My vision swam. But I pushed through the exhaustion. I was chiseling my freedom out of the rock of my paralysis one letter at a time. N-G-E-R, danger. Nina stared at the word. She looked at me with concern. Danger. You feel like you are in danger. Is it a medical danger? Are you feeling something we are missing? 2 blinks. No. Is it a person? 1 blink. Yes. Nina went pale. Who is a danger to you? I started spelling again. H-U-S-B-A-N-D. Nina dropped the pen. It clattered onto the floor. She stared at the paper and then at me. Her mouth opened slightly. Your husband, she whispered. Grant. But Madeline, he has been here every day. He cries over you. He is paying for the best care. I felt a surge of frustration. Grant's performance was too good. Even Nina, who was on my side, was struggling to reconcile the grieving widower with the monster I was describing. I needed to be specific. I needed to tell her exactly what he had done. I blinked rapidly to get her attention. I moved my eyes to the chart. Continue. I signaled, do not argue, just write. Nina picked up the pen. Her hand was shaking slightly. Okay. Go ahead. I began the sentence that would save my life. H-E, he, C-U-T, cut. Nina paused. He cut what? M-Y. My B-R-A-K-E-S. He cut my brakes. The silence in the room was absolute. Even the ventilator seemed to hold its breath. Nina looked at the words on the paper. They were simple words, childish almost in their block letters, but they carried the weight of a death sentence. She read it out loud. He cut my brakes. She looked at me. Her eyes were wide with horror. The skepticism was gone, replaced by a dawning realization of the evil that had been sitting in her patient's room. You mean the accident, she whispered. It was not an accident. 1 blink, yes. He tried to kill you. 1 blink, yes. And you know this. How did you see him? 2 blinks. No. Did he say it? 1 blink? Yes. Nina ran a hand through her hair. She stood up and paced the small space between the bed and the window. "Oh my God," she muttered. "He confessed. He must have confessed when he thought you could not hear him. That is why you were crying. That is why you are terrified." She turned back to me. Her face had changed. The gentle nurse was gone. In her place was a fierce protector, a woman who realized she was standing at a crime scene. "He is planning to do it again, isn't he?" she asked. Her voice was hard. "He is planning to finish the job." One blink. "Yes, that is why he keeps asking about withdrawing support. He wants to pull the plug." One blink. "Yes." Nina looked at the door. She looked at the chart where Grant had signed his name as the primary contact. She looked at my helpless body. "Okay," she said. She took a deep breath. "I believe you, Madeline. I believe you." She grabbed the paper with the message and folded it into a tiny square. She shoved it deep into her pocket. "We need proof," she said. "If I go to the police now with just your eye blinks, his lawyers will destroy us. They will say you are confused. They will say I am manipulating you. They will say it is brain damage. We need something concrete." She looked around the room. Her eyes landed on her own phone sitting on the bedside table. "He talks to you when he thinks you are alone, or does he talk to someone else?" I spelled one more name. K-E-L-L-Y. Kelly. Nina asked. "The blonde woman, the one who comes with him." One blink. "Yes." "They are together." One blink. "Yes." "Sick." Nina spat the word out. "Absolutely sick." "Okay. Here is what we are going to do." She picked up her phone. She tapped the screen a few times. "I am going to leave my phone here. I will hide it behind the water pitcher. I am going to set it to record. When they come back tonight, and they will come back, I need you to do exactly what you did this morning. Play dead. One blink. Yes. Let them talk," Nina said. "Let them get comfortable. Let them think they are safe. If they say anything at all about the breaks or the money or the plan, we will have them." She tucked the phone behind the plastic pitcher. The camera lens was blocked, but the microphone was facing the bed. "I will be right outside," Nina promised. "I will be watching the monitors. If he tries to touch the machines, if he tries to hurt you physically, I will burst in. I promise. I will not let him touch you." She took my hand one last time. "You are the bravest woman I have ever met, Madeline Hart," she said. "Now rest. You have a performance to give tonight." She left the room. The door clicked shut. I lay there in the gathering gloom. I was exhausted. My eyes throbbed. My body ached. But for the first time since the crash, I did not feel like a victim. I felt like a hunter. I was a trap waiting to be sprung. Grant Sterling thought he was coming to visit a vegetable. He thought he was coming to gloat over his victory. But he was wrong. He was walking into a lion's den, and the lion was awake. The sun began to set over Portland, casting long gray shadows across the linoleum floor of my hospital room. The fading light felt like a countdown. Nina stood by the bedside table. Her movements were precise and urgent. She held her smartphone in her hand like it was a loaded weapon. It was our only weapon. She tapped the screen. A small red dot appeared. "Recording." "I'm going to put it right here," Nina whispered. She tucked the phone behind the heavy plastic water pitcher on the bedside tray. The pitcher was translucent and full of ice water. It provided a perfect visual shield, but left the microphone exposed to the room. "If they look closely, they will see it," Nina said. Her voice was tight with anxiety. But people rarely look closely at the things they expect to be there. They expect water. They do not expect a trap. She turned to me. Her eyes were fierce. "You have to be a stone, Madeline. No matter what they say, no matter how much it hurts, you cannot react. If your heart rate spikes, the monitor will give you away. Grant is smart. If he sees the monitor jumping while he is talking about murder, he will know you can hear him." I blinked once. Yes, I understood the assignment. It was the hardest performance of my life. I had to lie there and let them desecrate my life while keeping my heart as slow as a hibernation. Nina squeezed my hand one last time, then she walked out. The door clicked shut. I was alone. The silence in the room was heavy. I stared at the water pitcher. I could see the dark outline of the phone through the plastic. It looked fragile. It looked like such a small thing to hold the weight of my entire future. Terror began to creep into my chest. It was a cold physical sensation. What if Grant moved the pitcher? What if he wanted a drink of water? What if Ivy knocked it over? If they found the phone, they would check the recording. They would hear Nina's voice telling me to stay calm. They would know everything. And then Grant would kill me. He would not wait for the doctors. He would pinch the ventilator tube or smother me with a pillow right there. I would die, knowing I had failed. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. The monitor beside me picked up the rhythm. Beep, beep, beep. The sound was getting faster. It was a telltale siren. Beep, beep, beep. I had to stop it. I had to control the one muscle in my body that was betraying me. I closed my eyes. I tried to visualize a calm sea. I tried to remember the sound of rain on the roof of the Craftsman house. I forced my mind away from the pitcher and the phone and the murder. I forced myself to dissociate. I am not here. I am floating. I am nothing. Slowly, the frantic beeping began to slow down. The rhythm returned to a steady mechanical pace. I lay in the gathering darkness and waited for the monsters to arrive. They arrived at 7:15. I heard the door open. I did not open my eyes. I kept them shut in feigned unconsciousness. I heard the heavy footsteps of Grant and the lighter clicking heels of Ivy. "Hey, baby," Grant said. He was talking to me. He was performing for the hallway. I checked with the nurse. He said to Ivy. His voice dropped to a normal volume as the door closed. "She said she is stable. No changes." "Thank God," Ivy said. She sounded exhausted. "I cannot take another week of this, Grant. It is creepy. Being in here with her." "It ends tomorrow," Grant said. I spoke to Dr. Vance. He is going to do one final assessment in the morning. When he confirms there is no brain activity, I will sign the papers to withdraw life support. Tomorrow. The word hung in the air. My execution was scheduled for tomorrow. "What about the arrangements?" Ivy asked. She pulled the chair close to the bed. I heard the scrape of legs on the floor. It was dangerously close to the table with the phone. "I am handling it," Grant said. "I told the funeral home we want a direct cremation. No service, no burial plot." "Cremation?" Ivy asked. "Is that what she wanted?" "Who cares what she wanted?" Grant snapped. "Burials cost $10,000. A plot costs another $5,000. Why would I bury money in the ground? Besides, I do not want a grave. I do not want a place I have to visit. I want her gone. Ash is cleaner. Ash is cleaner." I felt a flare of rage deep in my gut, but I stamped it down. I kept my heart steady. Beep, beep, beep. "And the house?" Ivy asked. Her voice brightened. "I already spoke to the realtor," Grant said. He sounded proud. "We can list it as soon as the death certificate is issued. The market is hot. We should get $1.2 million for it easily. Maybe more if we stage it right. We will get rid of all her clutter, all those books, my library." He was going to throw them in the trash. "We can buy the penthouse next month." Grant continued. "I saw a new listing in the Pearl District, floor-to-ceiling windows, a rooftop terrace. It is $2.5 million. But with the house sale and the insurance payout, we can pay cash." "Cash?" Ivy giggled. It was a greedy sound. "And Bali first class." Grant promised. "As soon as the check clears, we will disappear for a month. Just you and me. No debts, no wife, just paradise." They were spending my life. They were carving up my existence like vultures on a carcass. Every word was being recorded. Every callous sentence was being captured by the device sitting 6 inches away from Grant's hand. Suddenly, Ivy's voice changed. It became lower, more anxious. "Grant," she said. "What are you sure about the car?" she asked. "We have been over this." Grant sighed. "I know," Ivy said. "But I had a nightmare last night. I dreamt the police found the cut. I dreamt they saw the file marks on the brake line." I held my breath. The machine hissed. This was it. This was the moment we needed. Grant laughed. It was a cold, arrogant sound. "You are paranoid," he said. "Listen to me. The car is scrap metal. It was wrapped around a concrete barrier. The front axle was snapped in half. Even if they looked at the brake lines, they would just see torn rubber and metal. But you cut them, Ivy pressed. You physically cut them. Yeah, Grant said, and his voice was clear and distinct. I took a file and I sawed through 70% of the line. I left just enough so she could get on the highway. It was perfect. It looked exactly like wear and tear until she slammed on the pedal. There it was. The confession, clear as a bell. It was genius, Grant added. He sounded pleased with himself. No one is going to find it, Ivy. The police already closed the case. It was an accident. Case closed. He leaned down and kissed me on the forehead. Goodbye, Maddie, he whispered. Thanks for the penthouse. They stayed for another 5 minutes talking about dinner reservations. Grant bumped the table once. The water pitcher wobbled. I felt a surge of adrenaline so sharp it almost stopped my heart. But the pitcher did not fall. The phone remained hidden. Finally, they left. The door clicked shut. The silence returned. 10 seconds later, Nina burst into the room. She locked the door behind her. She grabbed the phone from behind the pitcher. Her hands were shaking. She tapped the screen to stop the recording. She plugged in her headphones and listened. I watched her face. I watched her eyes go wide. I watched her jaw drop. She pulled the headphones out. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. But they were tears of victory. We got him, she whispered. We got everything. He confessed to the cut. He confessed to the money. He confessed to everything. I blinked once. Yes, Nina smiled. It was a savage smile. I am calling Dr. Vance, she said. And then we are calling the police. You are not dying tomorrow, Madeline. But Grant Sterling, his life is over. The turning point of my war began not with a gunshot, but with a conversation in the hallway. Nina had left the room with the phone that contained the recording of my husband confessing to attempted murder. She returned 10 minutes later with Dr. Vance. The chief of neurology looked different than he had during his morning rounds. The arrogance and the clinical detachment were gone. In their place was a look of pale, disturbed urgency. He walked to the side of my bed and looked down at me. This time, he did not look through me. He looked at me. Nurse Rossi has played me a recording, Dr. Vance said. His voice was low and grim. Low, and it is very disturbing content, Madeline. But before we address the legal implications, I need to verify your medical status. Nina tells me you have been communicating. I blinked once. Yes. Dr. Vance took a sharp breath. He pulled a penlight from his pocket. I am going to perform a series of tests, he said. I need you to focus. If you can hear me, I want you to look up. I strained the muscles of my eyes. I rolled them upward toward the water stain on the ceiling. Remarkable, Dr. Vance whispered. Now look down. I looked down toward the sheet covering my feet. Look left. I looked left toward the ventilator. Look right. I looked right toward Nina, who was standing there with her hands clasped in prayer. Dr. Vance clicked the penlight off. He ran a hand over his face. He looked shaken. He looked like a man who had just realized he had been preparing to bury a living woman. Locked-in syndrome, he murmured. It is a rare neurological disorder. Total paralysis of all voluntary muscles except for the vertical eye movements and blinking. The patient remains fully conscious and cognitive function is intact. He turned to Nina. She has been awake the whole time, he said. He sounded horrified. She has felt everything. She has heard everything. Including her husband planning her funeral, Nina added sharply. Dr. Vance nodded, his jaw set into a hard line. I owe you an apology, Madeline, he said to me. I failed you. I looked at the scans and I saw damage. I did not look for the person. I am sorry. I blinked once. It was not forgiveness. It was acknowledgement. We did not have time for apologies. We had a murderer to catch. Dr. Vance straightened his spine. He became the authority figure again, but this time he was on my side. This changes everything, he declared. As a conscious patient, you retain your rights. Grant Sterling no longer has medical power of attorney. He cannot make decisions for you. He certainly cannot withdraw life support. He turned to Nina. Call the police. he ordered. "Tell them we have a case of attempted murder and a patient who is a witness to her own assault. And tell them to send detectives immediately. We need to secure this room before Mr. Sterling returns." He looked back at me. "You are safe now," Dr. Vance promised. "He will not get near you again. I will place a security guard at the door. No one enters this room without my direct permission." I felt a weight lift off my chest that was heavier than the paralyzed muscles. I was no longer a victim waiting to be executed. I was a plaintiff. I was a witness. I was safe. The police were on their way, but I needed something more than law enforcement. I needed blood. I needed family. Dr. Vance asked if there was anyone else he should call. I spelled out a name on the letterboard with Nina's help. T-E-S-S, Tess, my older sister. Tess arrived 40 minutes later. She burst into the room like a hurricane. Tess was 40 years old, and she had always been the fierce one. She was the one who scraped her knees climbing trees while I sat inside reading. She was the one who had never liked Grant. She had never trusted his charm or his perfect smile. She had told me on my wedding day that he looked like a man who loved himself more than he could ever love a woman. I had been angry with her then. I wished I had listened. Tess stopped in the doorway. She saw the machines. She saw the tube in my throat. She saw the stillness of my body. Her face crumpled. She dropped her purse on the floor and rushed to the bed. "Maddie," she sobbed. "Oh my God, Maddie." She did not hesitate. She did not ask permission. She threw her arms around me. She buried her face in my neck. She smelled of rain and lavender detergent and home. I felt her tears hot and wet against my skin. I felt the shaking of her shoulders. And for the first time in 2 weeks, I felt a touch that was pure. Grant's touch had been possessive. It had been cold. It had been a performance. But Tess's touch was elemental. It was the fierce, protective love of a sister who would burn the world down to keep me safe. I felt a profound ache in my chest. I wanted to hug her back. I wanted to wrap my arms around her and tell her I was sorry. I was sorry for pulling away. I was sorry for choosing Grant's shiny world over her solid one. I was sorry for being so blind. Tess pulled back. She looked into my eyes. She saw what Nina and Dr. Vance had seen. She saw me. "They said you were a vegetable," Tess cried. She wiped her eyes furiously. "They said you were gone, but you are here. I can see you." I blinked once. "Yes." Nina stepped forward. She placed a gentle hand on Tess's shoulder. "She is fully conscious," Nina explained softly. "She can hear you. She can understand you. She communicates with blinks." Tess looked at Nina and then back at me. A mixture of relief and horror washed over her face. "You have been awake," she asked, "this whole time." One blink. Yes, alone. One blink. Yes. Tess covered her mouth with her hand. She let out a ragged sound that was half sob and half scream. The thought of my isolation, the thought of my terror. It broke her heart. Then Nina spoke the words that would turn my sister's grief into a weapon. She was not entirely alone, Nina said. Grant was here, and his mistress. Tess froze. She lowered her hand. Her eyes went hard. "Mistress?" she asked. Her voice was dangerous. Nina nodded. She told Tess everything. She told her about Ivy. She told her about the conversation regarding the insurance money. She told her about the plan to buy a penthouse. And finally, she told her about the confession. "He cut the brakes," Nina said. "He admitted it on tape. He tried to kill her, Tess." I watched my sister's face transform. I saw the sadness evaporate. I saw the shock vanish. In their place came a fury so cold and so absolute that it terrified me. Tess stood up. She looked at my broken body. She looked at the machine breathing for me. She looked at the scars on my face. "He did this," Tess whispered. It was not a question. She turned to the window. She looked out at the city where Grant was probably celebrating his impending victory. Her hands curled into fists at her sides. Her knuckles were white. "He tried to murder my baby sister," she said. She turned back to me. Her eyes were blazing. "I knew it," Tess hissed. "I knew he was a snake, but I never thought he was a monster." She grabbed my hand. She held it tight. "I am going to kill him," she swore. "I am going to tear him apart with my bare hands." 2 blinks. "No." Tess looked at me. She understood. "No," she asked, "you do not want me to kill him." 2 blinks. No, I did not want him dead. Death was too easy. Death was what he had planned for me. I wanted him to suffer. I wanted him to lose everything. I wanted him to rot in a cage for the rest of his life, knowing that I was the one who put him there. "You want justice," Tess said. She squeezed my hand. "You want to destroy him." 1 blink. "Yes." Tess nodded. She wiped the last tear from her cheek. She stood tall. She looked like a warrior queen. "Okay," she said. "We will do it your way. We will work with the police. We will spring the trap. But Maddie, I promise you this." She leaned down and kissed my forehead. Her lips were warm and fierce. "He is never going to hurt you again. From this moment on, he has to go through me, and I am going to make sure he regrets the day he was born." The team was assembled. The doctor who could prove I was alive, the nurse who had the evidence, and the sister who had the rage. We were ready for him. The arrival of the police turned my hospital room into a command center. 2 detectives entered at 8 in the morning. One was Detective Morrison, who was a tall man with sharp eyes and a demeanor that suggested he had seen every variety of human cruelty. The other was Detective Park, who was quieter but possessed an intensity that made the air in the room feel charged. They listened to the recording Nina had captured. They listened to my husband confess to cutting my brake lines. They listened to him discuss spending my life insurance money on a penthouse and a mistress. When the audio finished, Detective Morrison looked at me with a grim expression. "We have him, Mrs. Sterling," he said. "This is admissible. We have motive. We have opportunity. And thanks to your nurse, we have a confession. But it is not enough." Detective Park interjected. He stepped closer to the bed. "If we arrest him now based solely on this recording, a good lawyer could tear it apart. They will claim entrapment. They will claim he was drunk or grieving or just talking tough to impress his girlfriend. They will say the recording is out of context." Tess stood up from the chair in the corner. Her hands were balled into fists. "He admitted to cutting the brakes," she said. Her voice was shaking with rage. "What more do you need?" "We need action," Detective Morrison said. "We need him to take the final step. We need him to attempt to kill her again." The room went silent. The only sound was the hiss and click of my ventilator. "Here is the plan." Detective Morrison continued. "Dr. Vance calls Grant Sterling this morning. He tells him that the final neurological assessment confirms 0 brain activity. He tells him that it is time to make a decision. He wants to pull the plug." Dr. Vance said quietly. "He has been pushing for it all week." "Exactly," Detective Park said. "We invite him here to sign the paperwork. We invite him to legally authorize the withdrawal of life support from a woman he knows is alive, or at least a woman he tried to kill. The moment he puts his pen to that paper, he is committing a definitive act. He is finishing the murder he started." And then Nina asked. "And then we reveal ourselves," Detective Morrison said. "We will have officers stationed in the hallway. Detective Park and I will be in the room posing as members of the hospital ethics committee. We will question him. We will pressure him about the accident. We will catch him in his lies while the tape is rolling." He turned to me. "But this relies on you, Mrs. Sterling," he said. "You have the hardest job of all." I waited. I blinked once to show I was listening. "You have to play dead," Detective Morrison said. "One last time. When he comes in here, he needs to believe he has won. He needs to believe you are a vegetable. If you flinch, if you blink, if your heart rate spikes too high, he might get suspicious and lawyer up before he signs the papers. We need him to feel safe. That is when predators make mistakes." I understood. They were asking me to lie defenseless while my murderer stood over me and signed my death warrant. They were asking me to suppress my survival instinct. They were asking me to let him believe he had succeeded in destroying me. It was a terrifying request. The thought of Grant standing over me again made bile rise in my throat. The thought of his hands on me. The thought of his arrogant voice dismissing my life. It made me want to scream. But I looked at Tess. She gave me a nod of encouragement. I looked at Nina. She squeezed my hand. I could do this. I had survived the crash. I had survived 2 weeks of locked-in syndrome. I had survived the knowledge of his betrayal. I could survive 1 more hour of silence if it meant he would spend the rest of his life in a cage. I focused on Detective Morrison. I blinked once. Yes. Good, Detective Morrison said. He checked his watch. It is 9 in the morning. Dr. Vance, make the call. Tell him to be here at 2 in the afternoon. Tell him to come alone. Dr. Vance nodded and left the room to make the call that would seal Grant's fate. The next 4 hours were an agony of anticipation. The room was prepped like a stage set. Hidden cameras were installed in the ventilation grate and behind the television monitor. Microphones were taped to the underside of the bed railing. Every angle was covered. Tess had to leave the room. She argued, but the detectives were firm. Grant would not sign the papers if his sister-in-law was watching him with hatred in her eyes. She had to wait in the observation room down the hall, where she could watch on a monitor. Nina stayed. She scrubbed my face and combed my hair. She made me look like the perfect tragic victim. "You are going to do great," she whispered as she adjusted my pillow. "Just breathe. Or let the machine breathe for you. Just be a stone Madeline. Be a stone that is about to crush him." At 1:30 in the afternoon, Detective Morrison and Detective Park put on white lab coats. They put on lanyards that identified them as Dr. Silas and Dr. Lee from the ethics board. They took their places in the corner of the room, holding clipboards. At 1:55, I heard the elevator ding down the hall. I heard the heavy, confident footsteps approaching. Click, clack, click, clack. My heart hammered against my ribs. I closed my eyes. I relaxed my jaw. I let my hands go limp. I retreated into the dark, quiet place in my mind. I became the void. The door handle turned. Grant Sterling walked into the room at exactly 2 in the afternoon. He brought the smell of rain and expensive cologne with him. He did not look like a murderer. He looked like a heartbroken husband. His shoulders were slumped. His tie was loosened. He carried the weight of a tragic decision in his posture. He nodded to Nina. He nodded to Dr. Vance. He looked at the two strangers in lab coats with a brief flicker of wariness, but he quickly dismissed them. "Mr. Sterling," Dr. Vance said, "thank you for coming. These are Dr. Silas and Dr. Lee from the Hospital Ethics Committee. They are here to witness the procedure and ensure all protocols are followed." Grant shook their hands. His grip was firm. His palms were dry. He was calm. "I just want to do what is right for my wife," Grant said. His voice was thick with emotion. "I do not want her to suffer anymore." "She is not suffering," Detective Morrison said. He was playing his role perfectly. As we explained on the phone, she has no brain activity. She feels nothing. Grant looked at the bed. He looked at my face. I felt his gaze crawling over my skin like a spider. It took every ounce of my willpower not to shudder. I kept my breathing synchronized with the machine. I kept my eyelids heavy and still. "She would hate this," Grant said. He walked to the side of the bed and touched my hand. His fingers were cold, being kept alive by machines. It was her biggest fear. She told me once that if anything ever happened, she wanted to go with dignity. Liar! I screamed in the silence of my mind. We never had that conversation. You are inventing my death wish to justify your greed. Dr. Vance stepped forward holding a clipboard. "If you are certain, Mr. Sterling," he said, "this is the authorization form. It gives us permission to extubate and withdraw all life-sustaining measures. Once you sign this, we will turn off the ventilator. Cardiac arrest will follow within minutes." Grant looked at the clipboard. He did not hesitate. He did not pause to reconsider. He did not ask for one more moment. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a pen. It was a Mont Blanc fountain pen I had given him for his birthday 3 years ago. "Where do I sign?" he asked. "At the bottom," Dr. Vance said. I heard the scratch of the nib against the paper. It was a loud scratching sound in the quiet room. Scritch, scratch. That was the sound of my husband killing me. He signed his name with a flourish. He signed it with the confidence of a man who was cashing a check. "There," Grant said. He handed the clipboard back. "It is done." "Not quite," Detective Morrison said. He stepped forward. "Before we proceed with the extubation, there are a few questions we need to clear up regarding the cause of the trauma." Grant stiffened. "What questions?" "It was a car accident. Standard procedure," Detective Morrison said. "We reviewed the police report. It mentions brake failure." Grant let out a short laugh. It was nervous. "Yeah, it was raining. The roads were slick. Old car, bad brakes. It was a tragedy. Was it an old car? Detective Park asked. He looked at his notes. A 2015 sedan. That is not very old, Mr. Sterling. And according to the maintenance records, the vehicle was serviced 3 weeks prior to the crash. The brakes were listed in excellent condition. Grant shifted his weight. He wiped a hand across his mouth. Mechanics make mistakes, he said. Look, what does this have to do with my wife? I just signed the papers. Can we please let her go? We are just confused, Detective Morrison pressed, because brake lines do not usually fail simultaneously on all 4 wheels unless they are severed. The air in the room changed. The pretense of the ethics committee evaporated. Grant looked from one doctor to the other. He saw the hardness in their eyes. He saw the trap closing. Severed, Grant asked. His voice cracked. That is ridiculous. Who would sever her brake lines? That is what we were wondering, Detective Morrison said. Who would gain from her death? Who would inherit $2 million in insurance money? Who was $40,000 in debt and facing bankruptcy? Grant took a step back. His face went pale. He looked at the door. I do not have to listen to this, he said. I am grieving. My wife is dying. I want you to leave. We are not leaving, Mr. Sterling, Detective Morrison said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Because we have something we think you should hear. He pressed play. The sound of Grant's voice filled the room. It was loud and clear. Yeah, I did it. I took a file and I sawed through 70% of the line. It was genius. No one is going to find it, Ivy. Grant froze. He looked like he had been turned to stone. He stared at the phone with his mouth open. The color drained from his face, leaving him gray and ashen. I did it for us. For the money. Detective Morrison stopped the recording. Grant looked around the room wildly. Where did you get that? He whispered. That was private. You were confessing to attempted murder, Detective Park said. He pulled his badge from his pocket. Grant Sterling, you are under arrest. No, Grant stammered. No, you cannot. That is inadmissible. I did not mean it. I was distraught. He looked at Dr. Vance. He looked for an ally. Tell them. Grant pleaded. She is brain dead. She is a vegetable. Even if I did it, it does not matter now. She is gone. Dr. Vance looked at Grant with pure contempt. She is not gone, Mr. Sterling, Dr. Vance said. His voice was cold steel. I lied to you. Your wife is not in a vegetative state. She has locked-in syndrome. Grant blinked. What? She is fully conscious, Dr. Vance said. She has been conscious for 2 weeks. She heard you plotting with your mistress. She heard you laughing about the money. She heard you confess. Grant stumbled back against the wall. He looked at the bed. He looked at me. No, he whispered. That is impossible. She can't be. Dr. Vance turned to me. Madeline, he said gently, you can open your eyes now. This was my moment. I opened my eyes. I did not blink. I stared straight ahead at the man who had promised to love me and then tried to butcher me for cash. I focused my gaze on his face. I saw the sweat on his forehead. I saw the terror in his eyes. Grant looked at me, and he saw it. He saw the intelligence. He saw the recognition. He saw the judgment. Maddie. He choked out. I blinked once. A slow, deliberate blink. I see you. Grant let out a sound that was like a wounded animal. He fell to his knees. The arrogance was gone. The confidence was gone. He was just a pathetic, broken man on the floor of a hospital room. Oh, God, he sobbed. Oh, God, Maddie, I am sorry. I am so sorry. Detective Morrison and Detective Park moved in. They grabbed him by the arms and hauled him to his feet. They pulled his hands behind his back. I heard the click of handcuffs. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. Better than music. Better than poetry. You have to understand, Grant babbled as they dragged him toward the door. The business was failing. I was going to lose everything. I did it for us. I wanted to save us. He looked back at me one last time. His eyes were begging for mercy. "I love you," he screamed. "I love you, Maddie. Please tell them. Tell them it was a mistake." I stared at him. I summoned all the energy I had left. I wanted to spit on him. I wanted to scream, but I had only one weapon. I blinked twice. "No." Detective Morrison shoved him through the doorway. "Get him out of here," the detective said. The officers in the hallway took him. I heard his voice fading down the corridor, still screaming my name, still begging for a forgiveness he would never receive. The room went quiet. Dr. Vance let out a long breath. Nina rushed to the side of the bed. She was crying. She took my hand and kissed it. "You did it," she whispered. "You did it, Madeline. He is gone. He is never coming back." I felt a sensation spread through my chest. It was warm and fierce. It was not happiness, not yet. It was satisfaction. It was the savage, dark satisfaction of the hunter who has finally trapped the beast. Grant Sterling was going to prison. He was going to lose his money. He was going to lose his reputation. He was going to lose his freedom, and I was alive to watch it happen. I looked at Nina and blinked once. Yes, the nightmare was over. The revenge had just begun. The trial took place 8 months after the accident. It was a cold morning in June, but inside the Multnomah County Courthouse, the air was stifling and hot. I sat in my wheelchair near the prosecution table. My hands rested in my lap. They were still weak. They still trembled when I was tired. But they were my hands again. They obeyed my commands. Grant sat at the defense table. He looked smaller than I remembered. The expensive suits were gone. He wore a cheap gray blazer that did not fit him properly. His hair was thinning. His skin was sallow. He looked like what he was: a bankrupt man, a failure, a criminal. His lawyer had tried everything. He argued that the recording was inadmissible. He argued that Grant was under duress. He argued that the brake lines had been damaged by road debris. But the forensic evidence was irrefutable. The tool marks on the brake line matched a file found in Grant's tool chest. The financial records showed a man desperate enough to kill. And then there was me. I testified via a special computer screen at first, but for the sentencing, I wanted to speak. I wanted him to hear my voice. My voice was different now. It was slower. It was slurred and thick, as if my tongue was too heavy for my mouth. But every word was intelligible. I told the jury about the silence. I told them about the itching. I told them about the conversation regarding the cremation. I told them about the kiss he shared with his mistress over my paralyzed body. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty. The word rang out in the courtroom like a church bell. Guilty on all counts. Attempted murder in the first degree, insurance fraud, conspiracy. When the judge asked Grant if he had anything to say, he stood up. He looked at me. He opened his mouth as if to offer one last lie, one last manipulation. But he closed it again. There was nothing left to say. The mask had been stripped away completely. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 25 years. Grant slumped back into his chair. The bailiffs moved in to take him into custody. As they pulled him up, he turned his head. He looked at me one last time. His eyes were filled with a mixture of hatred and confusion. He still could not believe that I had beaten him. I looked him in the eye. I focused all my energy on my right arm, the arm that had been dead for so long, the arm he had tried to destroy. It was heavy. It felt like lifting a block of cement. My muscles shook with the effort. Sweat broke out on my forehead. But I pushed. I pushed with the rage of the woman who had been silenced. My hand rose, my fist clenched. And then slowly and deliberately, I extended my middle finger. The courtroom gasped. My mother covered her mouth. Nina, who was sitting in the front row, let out a loud cheer. It was vulgar. It was unladylike. It was perfect. Grant stared at the gesture. He stared at the symbol of my defiance, and for the first time, I saw him look away. He looked down at the floor. He was broken. The aftermath was swift and brutal for them. Ivy Summers pled guilty to conspiracy and received 10 years in prison. She cried when they led her away. She looked young and foolish and lost. I felt nothing for her. She had made her choice when she sat on my bed and laughed about spending my money. Grant lost everything. His company was liquidated to pay his debts. The house in the Pearl District was sold. His reputation was incinerated. He went into prison with nothing but the clothes on his back and the knowledge that his wife had outsmarted him. That was 2 years ago. I am sitting in my new living room now. It is a small cottage near the river. It is not grand. It does not have marble countertops or crystal chandeliers. But it is warm. It is full of light. And most importantly, it is full of my books. I can walk now. I use a cane and my gait is uneven, but I am upright. I can feed myself. I can dress myself. I can speak well enough to be understood by everyone. I finished my book. I wrote it in the early mornings just like I used to, but this time no one told me to stop. This time no one told me it made me look old. The book is a memoir. It is the story of a woman who was buried alive and dug herself out with her eyelashes. It is dedicated to Nina. Nina is still my best friend. She comes over every Friday for wine and bad movies. And sometimes she brings her brother. His name is Leo. He is a carpenter. He has rough hands and a gentle voice. He listens when I speak, even when it takes me a long time to get the words out. He does not care about status or money. He cares about me. Last night we went to dinner. He reached across the table and took my hand. He did not squeeze it to possess me. He held it to connect with me. I looked at our joined hands. I looked at the scars on my wrist. I looked at the cane leaning against the table. I am not the same woman I was before the accident. I never will be. I am harder now. I am warier. I have seen the darkness in the human heart, and I cannot unsee it. But I am also stronger. I am a survivor. Grant Sterling wanted to erase me. He wanted to turn me into ash and money. Instead, he turned me into steel. He is rotting in a cell staring at concrete walls. I am sitting in the sun drinking coffee and writing my next chapter. I won. Lesson learned. True revenge isn't about inflicting pain. It's about surviving and thriving when they wanted you buried. My story is a harsh reminder for every woman who has silently diminished herself to fit into a husband's shadow. Sacrifice should never mean self-erasure. We often ignore the subtle red flags, the undermining of our dreams, the financial secrecy mistaking control for care. Trust your instincts. Your voice, your ambitions, and your life are precious. If someone requires you to disappear for them to shine, they don't love you. They are consuming you. Don't wait for a tragedy to reclaim your power.